Today's episode is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at www.anxietydiariespodcast.com/audible. Hello and welcome to Anxiety Diaries, a weekly podcast about mental health, incredible people, and so much more. I'm your host, Scott Neumeier, and this is episode 24. If you like what you hear, please make sure you subscribe, rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts if possible, and share it with a friend. Today on the podcast, we have Adam Cayton-Holland. He's a national touring headliner who was named one of 25 comics to watch by Esquire magazine and one of 10 comics to watch by Variety. Along with his cohorts in the Grawlix comedy troupe, Adam created, writes, and stars in truTV's Those Who Can't. He has appeared on CONAN, The Late Late Show with James Corden, Happy Endings, Deadbeat, Flophouse, Hidden America, and many more shows. He was also featured on the Nerdist and Comedy Bang Bang podcasts. Cayton-Holland has performed at the Montreal Just For Laughs, South by Southwest, and Bridgetown Comedy festivals, and helms his own comedy extravaganza in Denver, the High Plains Comedy Festival. He has also performed at the Kennedy Center and Carnegie Hall. He has 3 albums, I Don't Know If I Happy, Backyards, and Adam Cayton-Holland Performs His Signature Bits, all available on iTunes, and his first book, Tragedy Plus Time, is in stores now from Touchstone Books. He once threw out the opening pitch at a Colorado Rockies game, and people have described him as genial and with decent teeth. I cannot confirm that he does in fact have decent teeth, but I can confirm that he's on the podcast this week. We talked about many different things, including his excellent new book, Tragedy Plus Time, his late sister Lydia, the state of comedy today, and we even talk a little bit about birdwatching. It's a really interesting conversation. Adam's a great guy, and he has a lot to say. That's what we're going to talk about today. So without further ado, here is Adam. Welcome to the podcast, Adam. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Your new book is heartbreakingly great, and I appreciate you chatting about it a little bit. For those who may not already know, can you tell us a little bit about you and the book?
Yeah, the book's called Tragedy Plus Time, and I'm a stand-up comic and writer and I guess actor, though I hate saying that. And it's the book is a memoir about my life and my life with my little sister, Lydia, who took her own life 6 years ago. And that was obviously devastating for me and my family. And it's kind of about growing up and finding my sense of humor alongside my sister and then losing her right when a lot of really good career stuff was happening and trying to reconcile everything and not throw in the towel. That's what the book's about.
You know, I'm sure you've done probably a bunch of interviews already for this release, but I assume not many people have asked you about Lydia herself. Tell me about Lydia. I mean, from the book, she seems like a beautiful person, but I'd want to hear from you. Yeah,
no, I love that question. I mean, Lydia was like a co-conspirator. Like, I don't have anyone. I'm married and I love, my wife is great and I'm close with my older sister, but like, I would geek out with Lydia about things. You know what I mean? It's like that friend that you could just unabashedly obsess about stuff with. And that was our whole life. Like, I mean, from when we were kids, it'd be, cartoons and TV shows. And when we were in our early 20s, it was the White Stripes. And I remember like learning about the musician Bon Iver. And I was like, you got to listen to this dude. And she would be like, oh my God. And most people are waiting for their turn to speak. And she would just kind of go down the rabbit hole with you. And I don't know, that's what I miss most about her is like when I find something new and I want to share it, no one gets it like she would have gotten it, And I feel like those people are gifts in your life.
You can tell from the book too. I mean, it really does seem like she was like your buddy. She was your little buddy.
Totally. We always shared music. So like I was late to the game on the band Built to Spill. I didn't know about them in the early 90s, late 90s. Now they're like my absolute favorite band. And I was like, oh my God, I want to show Lydia Built to Spill. I was like, that's the sound of our life. But yeah, I don't have that anymore.
Is that the kind of stuff you think about when you're listening to that? Like, is that what comes across your mind?
Well, they have a sort of model and sound that I just am intrigued by. But yeah, often a movie or, anything, I feel bummed I can't share it with her. And also, I feel bummed that I can't relate to someone like that on that level because I want to geek out further than anyone wants to geek out. But I'm, in my late 30s. It's not as acceptable anymore to go to your like high school buddy and be like, oh my God, you've got to hear this album. Like, but I could do that with my sister and it was never anything to like be ashamed of.
Right. I mean, that's what Twitter's for, I guess now, but you have to deal with trolls there.
There you go. Yeah, she was a troll-free Twitter.
Yeah. You know, the more I think about it too, and you actually even kind of say this in the book, Tragedy Plus Time is kind of your story, but it's really a book about Lydia. It's kind of a book about family and mental health and living through things that are difficult. But did you ultimately see this book as your way to tell Lydia's story rather than your own?
Absolutely. And I'm really glad that you picked up on that, because clearly it's a lot. I think it's, I'm a lot in there, but I think I wanted it to be a tribute to Lydia. Lydia died when she was 28, and the last 2 years of her life, only in hindsight are we able to see how severe they were and how the mental illness was really taking over. But for 26 years, she was vibrant and beautiful and smart and weird and quirky and funny. And I wanted the reader to get that. Like, I felt like I would have done a bad job if this book was just death and gloom and sad. I wanted to give people an idea of how amazing and unique my little sister was.
It is very much her biography through your eyes.
Well, thank you. I really love that. It's a tall order because, you're putting your family out there and she's gone. This is going to be the sort of final word on Lydia. So I didn't want to do her an injustice. I wanted to do it well. And I gave it to my mom and my dad and my older sister to read before I turned it into the editor. And I was like, anything you want changed, you let me know. There's no salacious details about my family. It wasn't and then mom and dad did this, because we were a very loving, great family. So there wasn't anything I was trying to hide, but I just wanted to make sure they were comfortable. My mother said after reading it, it was obviously devastating, but she said, I felt like I spent the afternoon with Lydia. And that's the best compliment I could ever hope. There's no review better than that.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I'm happy with that.
It reminds me of the story you tell in the book about her kind of memorial that you guys had in your sister's backyard, where your mom stayed up in your sister's room the whole time until the end, when someone kind of randomly started playing guitar and she came out. That was a beautiful moment, man. Really beautiful. It was
a beautiful. Yeah. I mean, my mom kind of she was so devastated. She was lying in a bed, couldn't be there for it, but she was listening to the eulogies out the window. And as you said, that guitar sort of just brought her down and she started hugging everybody. It was a pretty powerful moment.
You do talk a little bit throughout the book about your own mental health issues kind of growing up. You had this extreme empathy leaving you to having to go to a therapist because of the Sally Struthers commercials or, dealing with OCD. For those who haven't read the book yet, what were some of the specific mental health issues you were dealing with when you were young?
I think when I was very little, it was over empathy, which led to depression and just not being able to really stomach images of starving African children, like wanting to die when I saw that, as a 4-year-old. And then OCD and anxiety and stuff. In college, I got very depressed and suicidal, as I write about in the book. But then I pulled out of it. I mean, I still go to therapy and I'm still a depressive type, I think. But after watching Lydia, I realized I don't suffer from depression like that.
In the book, it feels like you put some of this blame on yourself for what happened. Have you been able to work through that since then?
I really have. I mean, I think any survivor does that. A lot of writing this book was working through that. And I don't feel any blame anymore. I mean, occasionally a twinge of it, but I've forgiven myself. And I don't really think there was anything to be forgiven for. I think I've just become more of a, just a believer in the truth of mental health being an extreme illness. And it was like I went up against cancer and cancer won,
Yeah, there's nothing you could have done.
Yeah. And it's taken a while to learn that, but I know that.
Do you think some of the OCD and some of those issues that you were dealing with growing up kind of came from this immense pressure? In the book, you put it as being one of the magnificent Cayton-Hollands. It doesn't feel like that was from your parents, though. It seems almost more self-induced than something your parents put on you.
Yeah, that's astute of you to say. I don't think my parents ever put any pressure on us. I mean, they expected a lot of us.
Right.
But I don't think they were harpies, being like, you're going to go to law school. They were great. They let us do whatever we wanted. I think there's a self-born pressure, and it's weird to talk about yourself in these terms, but I think my family's really intelligent. And I think there's a pressure in that to be like, well, how are you going to use this? What are you going to do with this? And I think most people have that feeling, but I think we definitely felt it, whether it was because it's in our DNA, we definitely felt that pressure. I did anyway.
And when you tell your parents that you want to be a comedian, it doesn't really fit that mold, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I remember telling my dad that, and he was like, okay, well, And he was just very practical. He's like, what are you making right now? How much you make this year? And he's like, okay, and what does this gig pay? And he's like, all right, well, I think you could give it a try for a few years. And if it really sucks, we'll be there if you fall on your ass. But yeah, man, you're talented. Go for it. It was like that simple.
That's awesome.
My family's that supportive.
In the book, you talk quite a bit about how comedy kind of helped you fit in, find your way, but really help you find your confidence that you didn't have before that. A line from The Simpsons was even one of the things that have really connected you and your sister. How did comedy help during the rough time you had when Lydia was going through her hard times and in the wake of her passing?
I mean, comedy has always been a safe space for me and her. We bonded over it. But when she died, I didn't feel funny, and I didn't feel like doing stand-up, and I didn't know if I could ever be funny again because I didn't want to be. But kind of serendipitously, right at that exact time, my friends and I sold a pilot of our TV show called Those Who Can't. And it was when Amazon was just starting television, and like, I think they kind of took us on as an afterthought, and they were like, can you make your pilot for $50,000, which for them is nothing. And we were like, that's the most money we've ever seen. Like, so we were able, with no oversight, to go back to Denver and shoot a pilot in a week with our buddies who are filmmakers. And it was, to this day, the most satisfying creative project I've ever done. No network exec breathing down your neck, just pure kids trying to figure out how to make a TV show. And it was so fun. And it was so not stand-up. It wasn't me on a stage saying, here's what I got to say. It was me and two good friends playing teachers in a failing public high school. So it was like really nice at that point to have a project that didn't have to be me bearing my soul. It could be a goofy TV show. And in doing it, we brought our most talented comic friends out there, Rory Scovel and Kyle Kinane are in the show. And like, I laughed so hard that week and I had so much fun. And it was the first time I was like, oh, I can still laugh. So it was a pivot comedically. It wasn't stand up, but it was what I needed. And eventually I got back on stage and was like, oh yeah, you can do this. But at that time, that sort of different, non-personal comedic effort was like a godsend.
It was like the perfect time for it to happen. And the worst time for it to happen.
Well, absolutely the worst time to happen. I mean, she should have been on set helping us, but I was able to lose myself in it. And then we wrapped production and I promptly sunk further into depression. But it was at least a glimmer of hope.
Do you think comedy in general, film, TV, stand-up, can play a big role in mental health? Do you think it takes some of that anxiety for people and kind of soothes it?
Oh, yeah. It's all about representation, right? Look at Crazy Rich Asians this weekend. It's like, yes, finally, thank you. And that's how the Asian community is feeling. Like, so I feel like earnest depictions of mental illness, earnest depictions of suffering and anguish and grief and mourning can only help, whether they're funny or not. I just feel like seeing it makes you feel less alone, which is all that art is. Not to be all pretentious, but it's like, I think that is what art is. You read a book and you're like, I've had these thoughts or feelings, and you're like, just feel a little better.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, and I feel like, in a larger perspective, with all these new voices being sought out in Hollywood, it's like, that's the importance of it. Opportunities aren't going to go away for people. It's just there's a wider net now, and it's like, it's great.
It seems like kind of a particularly strange time to be living as a comic, though. This line between jokes and being serious is like often blurred.
Oh, yeah, people digging through your old tweets.
Yeah, exactly. Do you feel like it's harder now than it has ever been to be a comic?
No, I don't. I think it's harder now to be a bad comic.
Sure. Yeah.
I think everyone's having to be a little more thoughtful about why they're saying what they're saying. But if you're a good comic, you were doing that anyway. So I think the bro idiots of the comedy world are like, why do I have to think about my rape joke? And you're like, 'cause you do. So I don't think it's harder. I think it's just harder for dumb people.
And it's just ubiquitous now. There's phones everywhere.
I don't know. I mean, I do think there is a tendency that people are looking for these gotcha moments and want to like really get a comedian because he wrote a tasteless joke 8 years ago on Twitter. And I think that's pretty bullshit. It's like comics find their voices. And if you go to an open mic, you see all sorts of dumb comics saying terrible things because they're a little toddler testing what they can get away with. And it just used to happen in these dumb open mics, so it didn't get out into the world. But now people are on Twitter testing what they can get away with. And I guarantee 10 years from now, they're like, oh, I hate that joke. But I don't think they're bad people for making a tasteless joke when they were young, figuring out what's taboo, what's not taboo. taboo. It's like you kind of have to test the parameters a little bit before you find what you're comfortable with.
When you hear of these things, does it make you want to go back and read all your tweets, or are you just like, no, I'm a decent human being, I'm not stupid like that?
Watch I say it and there's like some terrible thing in there, but no, I'm not going back and policing my tweets. I think I'm smart enough to be like, yeah, you know what? I would just say exactly what I just said to you. I was a young comic trying to figure out was it appropriate and what isn't. I missed the bar on that one.
I think that's the best way to handle it, is just be honest that, you know, you grow up and you're stupid sometimes.
I got jokes back in the day that I don't like, that are like offensive, you know, but prior to any sort of hyper awareness in comedy like we're currently living, I was like, wait, why am I making fun of a homeless person in this joke that's not really clever? Like, if you're a decent comic, I think you examine your act and you're like, what is it that I'm saying? And after a while, you're like, I don't need that joke. I'm punching down in that joke. Why am I doing that?
Do you think that this whole thing leads back to kind of a time of a less salacious comic?
I don't know. I really have no idea. I think both are still very successful. You know, I'll go see Doug Stanhope every day of the week. I don't know. I don't think so, because edgy is always fun and comics like to be edgy. I think just it's a more thoughtful version of edgy, because you're not going to get away with like clumsy edgy. If you pull it off very deftly and they're like, okay, you made an edgy blue punchline, but you're trying to subvert and you did it cleverly, then that's like good joke. It's not the same knuckleheads that are rising to the top, I don't think.
It's all about context rather than content, I guess.
I think so. And I think audiences are getting smarter too. So they want that context.
You're a super busy dude. Like, you're a comedian, you're always on the road. How do you deal with the stress of traveling and working so much while also having a family and writing a book, you know, dealing with being surrounded by a million dogs when you're home?
I just put that shit first, man. Like, Lydia taught me the importance of mental health. And I know that I'm happier in Denver, Colorado. So I don't know if that's detriment to my career or what, but I don't play gigs that I know are going to make me miserable. Like, I'm like, please don't book me in that comedy club in the mall for 4 days. I'll be miserable. This is born of a luxury of like having had 3 seasons of a TV show and being financially okay currently. But I'm learning how to say no to work that I don't want to do. And I'm happier. Like, I planted a garden this summer. It was like pulling a radish out of that garden was more satisfied than I felt about anything. I was like, I made food. So it's just, I try to find pleasure in the simple things, I guess.
Stress melts away when you're doing things on your own terms.
I mean, all my friends in comic, all the people I admire do the exact same thing. And it's kind of like, you do what you want to do, let other people catch up. It's like happiness matters most, mental health matters most. So balance it out. I'm trying constantly to balance it out.
And you kind of learn that the hard way. Like, you don't have a choice now.
I learned it the hardest way.
Who were some of the comics you looked up to when you were growing up and kind of coming into your own?
Patton Oswalt, Maria Bamford, Tig. I'm lucky. Like, I've gotten to a point where like all the comics I really looked up to are my buddies. Like Kyle Kinane and Rory Scovel, I think, are 2 of the most brilliant comics I've ever seen. And they're my friends. So yeah, those guys, Ben Roy and Andrew Orvidal, who are my cohorts and those who can't, I love watching those dudes work. They're brilliant.
What's been the most satisfying for you? The TV series, the book, the stand-up?
I always wanted to be a writer, so having a book come out is pretty cool. Like, there's this bookstore in Denver called The Tattered Cover that I grew up in, and I love it. And like, I'm having a book release there tonight. That just blows my mind. So even though it's a sad subject and I wish I didn't have to write this book, I'm still geeked out that I wrote a book. I think the book's pretty cool.
It's great. And you've got this awesome cover with you and your sister.
Yeah. My dad took that photo. I mean, it's a photo of a photo, but I love that it's from my dad's like cell phone. He took that photo.
It's beautiful. It's just beautiful that you're able to kind of memorialize her imprint on the cover. And now I'm sure you're going to go on a book tour and do the same thing.
Yeah. Well, what I like about that cover is it's me and it's Anna, my older sister, and Lydia. It's the 3 of us. And it was always the 3 of us. So I still think of us that way.
So she'll be able to come with you on tour.
Yeah. You know, some way, shape or form. She can't carry the merch, but she'll be there. She'll be there in spirit.
What are some of the things that you do on a daily basis for self-care to take care of yourself and kind of ward off the bad stuff?
Oh man, good question. I mean, I am a Colorado dude. So I like hiking and I really like bird watching. I'm like obsessed with bird watching. So I have a bird feeder in my backyard. I just got a hummingbird feeder and I love the birds in my neighborhood. And I've gotten my wife into it. That's like one of those simple, put your phone down, breathe, look at nature, listen to the different sounds the birds make. Like, I'm all about bird watching. Bird watching puts me in a zen state of mind. So I do that. And I put my phone down when I'm hanging out with my wife. When it's the evening and we're cooking and like watching TV, I put the phone up in the the bedroom. Like, get the phone out of your hand.
The bird watching is something that I haven't heard yet from anyone else, and I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, I go on trips. Like, I've gone to an elaborate bird watching things, and I got jokes about it. But to anybody who's like even mildly curious, set up a bird feeder in your backyard outside a window and get to know the birds in your neighborhood. And then you'll be like, oh, I want to branch out. And then you get to know the birds in your city, and then your state, and then your region. And as much as I travel as a comic, it's always fascinating to me when I'm in a new city. I'm like, all right, what are the birds here? It just keeps you observant, keeps you more present.
All your comic friends are going out drinking, and you're like, I'm going to look for birds.
Yeah, I'm kind of that guy.
You're a birder, dude.
I'm a birder, man.
That's
I
awesome.
hang out with old men and go birding. I'm already 100 years old.
Well, you're not the only one, man. I'm 38 and my body's about 70, so.
Yeah, I hear that.
Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast, man. I really, really enjoyed the book. It's a beautiful book. It's a great tribute to your sister, so thank you so much.
Thank you for asking questions about Lydia. I appreciate that.
Before we go this week, I want to mention one other podcast that I've been listening to this week that I really think you'll enjoy. It's called Boys Do Cry, BOYZ Do Cry. You can find them at boysdocry.com, BOYZDOCRY.com. It's another weekly podcast talking about mental health, but it's hosted by two students, Ram Reyes and Paulina Rodriguez. The conversations are really interesting. They're super open. They're obviously not medical professionals, just like we're not here at Anxiety Diaries, but they're just two open individuals talking from their own experience. They share their stories and they talk about their experiences. They have a really great rapport with each other, and they're really doing great things. So it's called Boys Do Cry, Mental Health Conversations. I really encourage you to check them out at boysdocry.com. I appreciate other people doing good things in this space, and they are definitely two people doing great things, so check them out. Call us, leave us a message at 732-903-4441, or drop us an email at anxietydiariespodcast@gmail.com. You can find the podcast at www.anxietydiariespodcast.com, where you can sign up for our newsletter as well. And you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Anxiety Diaries Podcast. We're also on Twitter at Anxiety Diary Pod. Thanks again for listening. Be well, and we'll see you next week.